If you're looking for every possible advantage in a competitive game, frame rate is a huge one. Here's why it matters and everything you can do to raise the frame count. Hi and welcome to the ASUS ROG channel. We're all about pushing games to the limit, and sometimes we do that just for kicks. Because half of the fun of PC gaming is having that extra control over your graphics settings, tweaking things, making them look as gorgeous as possible for the most immersive experience. But in a competitive setting, aesthetics are secondary. So in this video, we'll run through exactly why running competitive games at a higher frame rate can make it easier to get kills, win rounds, and set hot laps. We'll also detail everything you can do to boost your FPS. Don't worry, buying a brand new ASUS ROG Strix 4090 is only one of the options. If you're new here, subscribe for more and smash the like button to tell the algorithm this video's pretty good. Now, let's get stuck into why frame rate matters. Let's start with shooters. You need a lot of skills to prevail here, not just good aim. You need to think tactically, for example. Keep your cool, listen to teammate callouts, and know the map like it's your childhood home. And in many ways, we do think of Quake 3's Arena Q3D M17 as our actual childhood home. But the most fundamental skill here is tracking your targets, getting a bead on them, and pulling the trigger before they turn you into pate. So when you're watching an enemy in motion, the more frames your system's displaying, the more up-to-date information you have about where the enemy actually is. In this clip, we've slowed down some gameplay running at 30 FPS, where you can see how jerky the enemy player movement is. And here we're running at 60 FPS, slowed down again. You can see how much smoother the player's movement is, and how much more accurately you can track where they actually are. Since you're watching this video on YouTube, we can't show you what this same effect looks like beyond 60 FPS, say 120, 240, or even 360 FPS. But the lesson we've all learned here is that more frames equals more information, and more information means more kills. It's not just shooters that benefit from a higher frame rate. Let's take a look at the world of racing games, where fast reactions and silky smooth inputs on the controller are the key to fast times. And also this paint job, definitely worth half a second a lap. Anyway, in a racing game environment, opponent positions do matter, but what matters more is your ability to track your own position. You're making constant adjustments based on your inputs, so the sooner you can see the effects of traction loss, understeer, or lock up on the brakes, the sooner you can start correcting it. That principle holds true outside the track as well. Places like Fall Guys. Not the first title you'd think of in a discussion about racing games, but many of the events here are essentially just races to a finish line, and winning is all about reacting to the situation as it unfolds and evolves second by second. The more often you get an update on what's unfolding in this absolute miasma of aggressive little beans on an improbable assault course, the better you're able to perform.
Disclaimer: no amount of frames per second can console you when you've matched with a bad team in Fall Ball.
So, that's what frame rate can do in a competitive setting, but in truth it's just one half of the equation. To really maximize the benefit of all the added information your GPU's rendering and sending through to your display, you also need a monitor that can keep up the pace. Refresh rate measures the number of times your display updates itself per second. So in simple terms, if you've got a high-end rig pumping out 240 frames per second, but your monitor is a 60Hz model, you're not seeing 240 new frames every second on your screen. So if you've ever wondered why the wave of high refresh rate panels like the ASUS ROG Swift series has been such a revolution in esports and competitive games, it's all about translating those high frame rates into what's actually happening on screen. The ROG Swift PG259QN and PG259QNR models push that concept to the extreme, offering a huge 360Hz refresh rate. Now you just need a hardware and software environment to produce that many frames. Speaking of that, Now that we've covered why you want all of those extra frames, let's move on to how to actually get them. Like we just said, both hardware and software settings are responsible for FPS, and right now we're starting with software. The quickest and easiest way to increase frame rate is to lower the quality of your graphics preset in-game. We know it hurts, and nobody wants to have to settle for merely high subsurface scattering when there's max on the table. But the truth is, the frame rate gain to dropping down just a few resource-hungry settings often massively outweighs the fidelity loss. Look at the difference between max and medium shadow quality in these two scenes, and tell us you'd rather have that teeny tiny visual improvement than the extra frames per second. Lowering resolution is also really effective at raising frame rate. It's kind of a catch-all for every other rendering effect happening on screen, since you're telling your system it only needs to apply that insanely complex math to 2 million pixels in a 1080p frame now instead of 8 million in 4K. Easy. You do clearly lose some image sharpness, depending on how much you drop the resolution below your monitor's native res, but in certain games this can be an advantage in itself. Most CSGO pros play in 1280 by 960 resolution, outputting a 4:3 aspect ratio on 16:9 screens so that the stretched, lower resolution image renders larger player models to aim at. Looks weird, but gets results. You don't have to go all out on this, but there's definitely a balance to be struck between sharpness and frame rate, and in many games you can even use AI-based techniques like Nvidia's DLSS to render higher res frames than you're actually running natively. You've got options then, and they go well beyond simply running at your panel's native resolution. Deeper down the software tweaking rabbit hole, it's always a good idea to ensure you've got the latest drivers installed for your graphics card. If you've got an Nvidia card, look for this prompt in GeForce Experience telling you that there's a new driver available. It'll handle the download and installation with just a few prompts from you. It's a very similar process for AMD cards. Just check your Radeon software to see if there's a new driver available for download. If you want to get deeper into marginal gain territory, check your system settings too. Type startup into your Windows search bar, open your startup preferences, and look through all the processes that open by default every time you load Windows. You probably don't need them all, but they're taking a small amount of your system's resources to run, so uncheck any unnecessary apps. Finally, keep an eye on your available storage space. SSDs don't like running at near capacity, and you may find you get some frames back just by uninstalling a game or two. And now the most fun option of all. Getting cool new gear, throwing it into your machine, and pushing it beyond the boundaries of science, technology, and human understanding. Well, okay, maybe not that, but definitely overclocking it a bit and boosting your frame rate. Because while all the steps we've been through can improve your gaming performance, they can't magically make your graphics card, memory, or CPU more powerful. Ultimately, there's an upper limit to the amount of information they can process, and everything we've done so far has been about reducing the amount of that information. When you upgrade your PC components, you raise the ceiling on that processing power. Graphics cards should be your first port of call when it comes to boosting gaming performance. This is the engine room of any 3D rendering task, so you're always going to notice a higher performance increase from a new GPU than other components. The new Asus ROG Strix 4090 represents the absolute pinnacle of gaming power and cooling performance. It's the ultimate upgrade, but you don't have to go quite this extra to see a bump in FPS. Memory, CPU, and motherboard upgrades also give you some more data bandwidth, and they're generally less expensive than buying a new GPU. Plus, they give you some interesting overclocking options. The great thing about overclocking is, it's like a hardware upgrade, except it's absolutely free. Tweaking settings at BIOS level allows your components to operate slightly quicker, more efficiently, basically to live their best lives. And if you're using an Asus ROG motherboard as your overclocking platform, you can use ROG AI to do all of the tweaking for you with one click. It's not that we don't like ramping up clock speed multipliers 1 digit at a time and restarting our machine every 30 seconds. It's just that a Ferrari Testarossa just dropped in Forza Horizon 5 and we'd kinda rather be grinding for that. You got this? Thanks all. So, that's why frame rate is a big deal, and a few different approaches to boosting it, from tiny tweaks in your graphic settings to going full on beast mode in your online shopping basket and bringing in the upgrades. If you liked this video, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to us for more. We'll catch you in the next one.